Welcome to the final installment of The Devil in the White City. I'm going to go ahead and start out with the final subchapter. It's called Recessional. The roaring in the Olmsted's ears, the pain in his mouth, and the sleeplessness never eased, and soon an emptiness began to appear in his gaze. He became forgetful. On May the 10th of 1895, 2 weeks after his 73rd birthday, he wrote to his son John, "It has today for the first time become evident to me that my memory for recent occurrences is no longer to be trusted." That summer, on his last day in the Brookline office, he wrote 3 letters to George Vanderbilt, each saying pretty much the same thing. During a period in September of 1895 that he described as the bitterest week of my life, he confessed to his friends Charles Eliot his terror that his condition soon would require that he be placed in an asylum. "You cannot think how I have been dreading that it would be thought expedient that I should be sent to an institution," he wrote on September 26th. "Anything but that. My father was a director of an insane retreat, and first and last, having been professionally employed and behind the scenes in several, my dread of such places is intense." His loss of memory accelerated. He became depressed, paranoid, and accused son John of orchestrating a quote-unquote coup to remove him from the Maine, where his depression deepened, and he at times became violent. He beat the family horse. Mary and her sons realized there was little they could do for Olmsted. He had become unimaginable, his dementia profound, with deep sorrow and perhaps a good deal of relief. Rick lodged his father in McLean Asylum in Waverly, Massachusetts. Olmsted's memory was not so destroyed that he did not realize he himself had designed McLean's grounds. This fact gave him no solace, for he saw immediately that the same phenomenon that had diminished nearly every one of his works, Central Park, Biltmore, the World's Fair, and so many others, had occurred yet again. "They didn't carry out my plan," he wrote. "Confound them." Olmsted died at 2 a.m. on August the 28th of 1903. His funeral was spare, family only. His wife, who had seen this great man disappear before her eyes, did not attend. The Ferris wheel cleared $200,000 at the fair and remained in place until the spring of 1894, when George Ferris dismantled it and reassembled it on Chicago's north side. By then, however, it had lost both its novelty and the volume of ridership that the Midway had guaranteed. The wheel began losing money. These losses added to the $150,000 cost of moving it, and the financial damage done to Ferris's Steel Inspection Company by the continuing depression caused Ferris to sell most of his ownership of the wheel. In the autumn of 1896, Ferris and his wife separated. She went home to her parents. He moved into the Duquesne, Duquesne, Duquesne Hotel in downtown Pittsburgh. On November 17th of 1896, he was taken to Mercy Hospital, where he died 5 days later, apparently of typhoid fever. He was 37 years old. 1 year later, his ashes were still in the possession of the undertaker who had received his body. The request of Mrs. Ferris for the ashes was refused. The undertaker said, because the dead man left closer relatives. In a eulogy, 2 friends said Ferris had miscalculated his powers of endurance, and he died a martyr to his ambition for fame and prominence. In 1903, the Chicago House Wrecking Company bought the wheel at auction for $8,150. They reassembled it at the Louisiana Purchase Exposition of 1904. There, the wheel again became profitable and earned its new owners $250,000. On May the 11th of 1906, the Wrecking Company dynamited the wheel for scrap. The first 100-pound charge was supposed to cut the wheel loose from its support and topple it onto its side. Instead, the wheel began a slow turn, as if seeking one last roll through the sky. It crumbled under its own weight into a mountain of bent steel. Sol Bloom, chief of the Midway, emerged from the fair a rich young man. He invested heavily in a company that bought perishable foods and shipped them in the latest refrigerated cars to far-off cities. It was a fine, forward-looking business, but the Pullman strike halted all train traffic through Chicago, and the perishable foods rotted in their train cars. He was ruined. He was still young, however, and still Bloom. He used his remaining funds to buy 2 expensive suits, on the theory that whatever he did next, he had to look convincing. But one thing was quite clear, he wrote. Being broke didn't disturb me in the least. I had started with nothing, and if I now found myself with nothing, I was at least even. Actually, I was much better than even. I had had a wonderful time. That's a great way to look at it. I love that. 381 right here. I'm going to make a little note here. Beautiful. That's something I can resonate to. 381. I'm going to put that in my little log here. We'll revisit this at the end of the video. 381. Can't believe I'm that far into the book now. Look at how far we came. Alright, let's continue. Bloom went on to become a congressman and one of the crafters of the charter that founded the United Nations. The fair made Buffalo Bill $1 million, about $30 million today, which he used to found the town of Cody, Wyoming, built a cemetery and fairgrounds for North Platte, Nebraska, pay the debts of 5 North Platte churches. Hold on. What the hell's going on? Oh. Well. That's a thing. Well, someone's up there. Huh. Wonder if I could steal a kill here or two. But I'm hoping that's over. Alright, so before I was so rudely interrupted, we had something going on here, alright? Okay. Surprised nobody came up here. Anyways, let's continue. Buffalo Bill made $1 million, 30 million in today's dollars. Where is that at? There we go. Which he used to found the town of Cody, Wyoming. Built a cemetery and fairground on North Platte, Nebraska. Pay the debts of 5 North Platte churches. Acquire a Wisconsin newspaper. Hey, Johnny, there you go. And further the theatrical fortunes of a lovely young actress named Catherine Clemens, thereby deepening the already pronounced alienation of his wife. At one point, he accused his wife of trying to poison him. The Panic of 1907 destroyed his Wild West and forced him to hire himself out to circuses. He was over 70 years old but still rode the ring under his big white hat trimmed in silver. He died in Denver at his sister's house on January 10th of 1917 without the money even to pay for his burial. Theodore Dreiser married Sarah Osborne White in 1898. 2 years before publishing Sister Carrie, he wrote to Sarah, "I went to Jackson Park and saw what is left of the dear old World's Fair, where I learned to love you." He cheated on her repeatedly. What? God. Wow. Alright, well. Funny how that works, huh? Easy come, easy go. For Dora Root, life with John had been like living upon a comet. Their marriage had brought her into a world of art and money, where everything seemed energized and alive. Her husband's wit, his musical talent, those exquisite long fingers, so evident in any photograph, impaired a gleam to her days that she was never able to recapture after his death. Toward the end of the first decade of the 20th century, she wrote a long letter to Burnham. "It means so much to me that you think I have done well all these years," she wrote. "I have such grave doubts about myself whenever I stop to think about the subject, that a word of encouragement from one who has so wonderfully sounded out his life gives me a new impetus. If absorbing myself before the coming generation and humbly passing on the torch is the whole duty of women, I believe I have earned a word of praise." But she knew that with John's death, the doors to a brighter kingdom had softly but firmly closed. If John had lived, she told Burnham, all would have been different. Under the stimulus of his exhilarating life, I would have been his wife, as well as the mother of his children, and it would have been interesting. Patrick Eugene Joseph Prendergast stood trial in December of 1893. The prosecutor was a criminal attorney, hired by the state just for this case. His name was Alfred S. Trude. Prendergast, his lawyers tried to prove Prendergast was insane, but a jury of angry, grieving Chicagoans believed otherwise. One important piece of evidence tending to support the prosecution's case for sanity was the care Prendergast had taken to keep an empty chamber under the hammer of his revolver as he carried it in his pocket. At 2:28 p.m. on December 29th, after conferring for an hour and 3 minutes, the jury found him guilty. The judge sentenced him to death. Throughout his trial and subsequent appeal, he continued to send Trude postcards. He wrote on February 21st of 1894, "No one should be put to death no matter who it is. If it can be avoided, it is demoralizing to society to be barbarous." Clarence Darrow entered the case, and in a novel... Hold on. Don't ever shop there. Just for that, don't ever shop there. Sorry. Clarence Darrow entered a case, and in a novel maneuver won for Prendergast a sanity inquest. This too failed, however, and Prendergast was executed. Darrow called him a poor, demented imbecile. The execution intensified Darrow's already deep hatred of the death penalty. "I am sorry for all fathers and all mothers," he said. Years later, during his defense of Nathan Leopold and Richard Loeb, accused of killing a Chicago boy for the thrill of it, the mother who looks into the blue eyes of her little babe cannot help musing over the end of the child, whether it will be crowned with the greatest promises which her mind can imagine, or whether he may meet death upon a scaffold. Leopold and Loeb, as they became known worldwide, had stripped their victim to mask his identity. They dumped some of his clothes in Olmsted's lagoons at Jackson Park. In New York, at the Walford Astoria, a few years into the new century, several dozen young men in evening clothes gathered around a gigantic pie. The whipped cream toppings began to move. A woman emerged. She was stunning, with olive skin and long black hair. Her name was Farida, Farida, Farida Mazar. The men were too young to remember, but once, a long while before, she had done the danse du ventre at the greatest fair in history. When the men noticed now was that she wore nothing at all. Wow. So, aged poorly, huh? That's a good little thing of life, right? When you're young, whatever you choose to do professionally, if you stick with it, you know, the body can only get so much attention, but the mind and skills, that stuff you can, transfer, that's stuff that can go places with you. So, just food for thought for, I don't think that's a problem for men, but, the ladies out there, them women, you know how they are. Do I even survive? Uh-oh. Can a third party something real quick? Have a little fun here? Yeah, why not? Let's have a little fun here. Who dare shoot thou? Oh well. Let's continue. Holmes. In the fall of 1895, Holmes stood trial in Philadelphia for the murder of Benjamin F. Peitzel, District Attorney George Graham brought 35 witnesses to Philadelphia from Cincinnati, Indianapolis, Irvington, Detroit, Toronto, Boston, Burlington, and Fort Worth, but they never were called. The judge ruled that Graham would present only evidence tied directly to the Peitzel murder, and thus eliminated from the historical record a rich seam of detail on the murders of Dr. Herman W. Mudgett, alias Holmes. Graham also brought to the courtroom the wart Holmes had removed from Benjamin Peitzel's corpse, and the wooden box containing Peitzel's skull. There was a good deal of macabre testimony about decomposition in body fluids and the effects of chloroform. There was a red fluid issuing from his mouth, testified Dr. William Scott, a pharmacist who had accompanied police to the house where Peitzel's body had been discovered. And any little pressure on the stomach or over the chest here would cause this fluid to flow more rapidly. After one particularly grisly stretch of Dr. Scott's testimony, Holmes stood and said, "I would ask that the court be adjourned for sufficient time for lunch." There were sorrowful moments, especially when Mrs. Peitzel took the stand. She wore a black dress, black hat, and black cape, and looked pale and sad. Often she paused in mid-sentence and rested her head on her hands. Graham showed her the letters from Alice and Nellie and asked her to identify the handwriting. These were a surprise to her. She broke down. Holmes showed no emotion. It was an expression of utmost indifference, a reporter for the Philadelphia Public Ledger said. He made his notes with a manner as unconcerned as if he were sitting in his own office writing a business letter. Graham asked Mrs. Peitzel whether she had seen the children since the time in 1894, when Holmes took them away. She answered in a voice almost too soft to hear. "I saw them at Toronto, in the morgue, side by side." So many handkerchiefs appeared among the men and women in the gallery that the courtroom looked as if it had just experienced a sudden snowfall. Graham called Holmes the most dangerous man in the world. The jury found him guilty. The judge sentenced him to death by hanging. Holmes's attorneys appealed the conviction and lost. As Holmes awaited execution, he prepared a long confession, his third, in which he admitted killing 27 people. As with two previous confessions, this one was a mixture of truth and falsehood. A few of the people he claimed to have murdered turned out to be alive. Exactly how many people he killed will never be known. At the very least, he killed 9: Julia and Pearl Connor, Emmeline Sagrand, the Williams sisters, and Peitzel and his children. No one doubted that he had killed many others. Estimates ranged in high as 200. Though such extravagance seemed implausible, even for a man of his appetite, Detective Geyer believed that if the Pinkertons had not caught up with Holmes and arranged his arrest in Boston, he would have killed the rest of the Peitzel family. Thus, he fully intended to murder Mrs. Peitzel and Desi and the baby. Wharton is too evident for contradiction. Holmes in his confession also clearly lied, or at least was deeply deluded when he wrote, "I am convinced that since my imprisonment I have changed woefully and gruesomely from what I was formerly in feature and figure. My head and face are gradually assuming an elongated shape. I believe fully that I am growing to resemble the devil, that the similitude is almost completed. His description of killing Alice and Nellie rang true, however. He said he placed the girls in a large trunk and made an opening in its top. I'm going to change the volume here for a second. Alright, just for troll. Hey, friends. The moment he gets out, I'm going in. Dude, come on. What's up, dude? Get out for a second. Just get out for a second, it's cool. Oh, you can't shoot me from here. Why can't they shoot me from here? I wonder why. That blows, dude. And they got a team here too. Oh, they got me. Alright, smart move. I didn't know you could do that. Just for troll. Alright, let's continue. Here I left them until I could return, and at my leisure kill them. At 5 p.m., I borrowed a spade of a neighbor, and at the time called on Mrs. Peitzel at her hotel. I then returned to my hotel and ate my dinner, and at 7 p.m., I again returned to the house where the children were imprisoned, and ended their lives by connecting the gas with the trunk. Then came the opening of the trunk, and the viewing of their little blackened and distorted faces. Then the digging of their shallow graves in the basement of the house. He said of Peitzel, "It will be understood that from the first hour of our acquaintance, even before I knew he had a family, and who would later afford me additional victims for the gratification of my blood thirstiness, I intended to kill him." Afraid that someone would steal his own body after his execution, Holmes left instructions with his lawyers for how he was to be buried. He refused to allow an autopsy. His lawyers turned down an offer of $5,000 for his body. The Winstar Institute in Philadelphia wanted his brain. This request, too, the lawyers refused, much to the regret of Milton Greeman, curator of Winstar's renowned collection of medical specimens. The man was something more than a mere criminal who acted on impulse, Greenman said. He was a man who studied crime and planned his career. His brain might have given science valuable aid. I agree with that. Shortly before 10 a.m. on May 7th of 1896, after a breakfast of boiled eggs, dry toast, and coffee, Holmes was escorted to the gallows of Moyamensing prison. This was a difficult moment for his guards. They liked Holmes. They knew he was a killer, but he was a charming killer. The assistant superintendent, a man named Richardson, seemed nervous as he readied the noose. Holmes turned to him and smiled and said, "Take your time, old man." At 10:13, Richardson released the trap and hanged him. Using Holmes's instructions, workmen in the employ of Undertaker John J. O'Rourke filled a coffin with cement, then placed Holmes's body inside and covered it with more cement. They hauled him south, through the countryside, to Holy Cross Cemetery, a Catholic burial ground in Delaware County, just south of Philadelphia. With great effort, they transferred the heavy coffin to the cemetery's central vault, where 2 Pinkerton detectives guarded the body overnight. They took turns sleeping in a white pine coffin. The next day, workers opened a double grave and filled this too with cement, then inserted Holmes's coffin. They placed more cement on top and closed the grave. Holmes's idea was evidently to guard his remains in every way from scientific enterprise, from the pickling vat and the knife. The Public Ledger reported. Strange things began to happen that made Holmes's claims about being the devil seem almost plausible. Detective Geyer became seriously ill. The warden of Moyamensing prison committed suicide. The jury foreman was electrocuted in a freak accident. The priest who delivered Holmes's last rites was found dead on the grounds of his church of mysterious causes. The father of Emmeline Sagrand was grotesquely burned in a boiler explosion, and a fire destroyed the office of District Attorney George Graham, leaving only a photograph of Holmes unscathed. Alright, that's pretty trippy. No stone or tomb marks the grave of Herman Webster Mudgett, alias H.H. Holmes. His presence in Holy Cross Cemetery is something of a secret, recorded only in an ancient registry volume that lists his location as Section 15, Range 10, Lot 41, at the center of graves 3 and 4, just off a lane that the cemetery calls Lazarus Avenue, after the biblical character who died and was restored to life. Alright, dude, that's... Alright. I'm not getting scared, but I'm just gonna read that again. His presence in Holy Cross Cemetery is something of a secret, recorded only in an ancient registry volume that lists his location as Section 15, Range 10, Lot 41, at the center of graves 3 and 4, just off a lane that the cemetery calls Lazarus Avenue, after the biblical character who died and was restored to life. The entry also notes 10 feet of cement at the gravesite. There is only an open lawn in the midst of other graves. There are children and a World War I pilot. No one ever left flowers here for Holmes, but as it happens, he was not entirely forgotten. In 1997, police in Chicago arrested a physician named Michael Swangu at O'Hare Airport. The initial charge was fraud, but Swangu was suspected of being a serial killer who murdered hospital patients through the administration of lethal doses of drugs. Eventually, Swangu pled guilty to 4 murders, but investigators believed he had committed many more. During the airport arrest, police found in Swangu's possession a notebook in which he had copied passages from certain books, either from the inspiration they provided or because of some affirming resonance. One passage was from a book about H.H. Holmes called The Torture Doctor by David Franke. The copied passage sought to put the reader into Holmes's mind. He could look at himself in a mirror and tell himself that he was one of the most powerful and dangerous men in the world. Swangu's notebook read, he could feel that he was a god in disguise. Wow. Abroad the Olympic, Burnham waited for more news of Frank Millet and his ship. Just before sailing, he had written in longhand a 19-page letter to Millet, urging him to attend the next meeting at the Lincoln Commission, which was then on the verge of picking a designer for the Lincoln Memorial. Burnham and Millet had lobbied strongly for Henry Bacon of New York, and Burnham believed that his earlier talk to the Lincoln Commission had been persuasive. But I know, and you know, dear Frank, that the rats swarm back and begin to gnaw at the same old spot the moment the dog's back is turned. He stressed how important it was for Millet to attend, be there, and reiterate the real argument, which is that they should select a man in whom we have confidence. I leave this thing confidently in your hands. He addressed the envelope himself, certain that the United States Post Office would know exactly what to do. Han F.D. Millet, to arrive to Steamship Titanic, New York. Burnham hoped that once the Olympic reached the site of the Titanic's sinking, he would find Millet alive and hear him tell some outrageous story about the voyage. But during the night, the Olympic returned to its original course for England. Another vessel already had reached the Titanic. But there was a second reason for the Olympic's return to course. The builder of both ships, J. Bruce Ismay himself, a Titanic passenger, but one of the few male passengers to survive, was adamant that none of the other survivors see his duplicate of their own lost liner coming to their aid. The shock, he feared, would be too great and too humiliating to the White Star Line. The magnitude of the Titanic disaster quickly became apparent. Burnham lost his friend. The steward lost his son. William Stead had also been absorbed and was drowned. In 1886, in the Pall Mall Gazette, Stead had warned of the disasters likely to occur if shipping companies continued operating liners with too few lifeboats. A Titanic survivor reported hearing him say, "I think it is nothing serious, so I shall turn in again." That night, in the silence of Burnham's stateroom, as somewhere to the north, the body of his last good friend drifted frozen in the strangely peaceful seas of the North Atlantic. Burnham opened his diary and began to write. He felt an acute loneliness, he wrote. Frank Millet, who I loved, was aboard her, thus cutting off my connection with one of the best fellows of the fair. Burnham lived only 47 more days. As he and his family traveled through Heidelberg, he slipped into a coma. The result, apparently, of a combined assault of diabetes, colitis, and his foot infection, all worsened by a bout of food poisoning. He died June 1st of 1912. Margaret eventually moved to Pasadena, California, where she lived through a time of war and epidemic and crushing financial depression, and then war again. She died December 23rd of 1945. Both are buried in Chicago, in Graceland, on a tiny island in the cemetery's only pond. John Root lies nearby, as do the Palmers, Louis Sullivan, Mayor Harrison, Marshall Field, Philip Armour, and so many others, in vaults and tombs that vary from the simple to the grand. Potter and Bertha still dominate things as if stature mattered even in death. They occupy a massive acropolis with 15 giant columns atop the only high ground overlooking the pond. The others cluster around. On a crystalline fall day, you can almost hear the tinkle of fine crystal, the rustle of silk and wool, and almost smell the expensive cigars. And that is it for the book. I'm going to go ahead and read the last section here. It's notes and sources, about 2 pages. Shouldn't be too bad. The thing that entranced me about Chicago in the Gilded Age was the city's willingness to take on the impossible in the name of civic honor, a concept so removed from the modern psyche that two wise readers of early drafts of this book wondered why Chicago was so avid to win the World's Fair in the first place. The juxtaposition and pride and unfathomed evil struck me as offering powerful insights into the nature of men and their ambitions. The more I read about their fair, the more entranced I become. That George Ferris would attempt to build something so big and novel, and that he would succeed in his first try, seems, in this day of liability and lawsuits, almost beyond comprehension. That's a fair point. A rich seam of information exists about the fair and about Daniel Burnham in the beautifully run archives of the Chicago Historical Society and the Ryerson and Burnham Libraries of Art Institute of Chicago. I acquired a nice base of information from the University of Washington's Suzzallo Library, one of the finest and most efficient libraries I have encountered. I also visited the Library of Congress in Washington, where I spent a good many happy hours immersed in the papers of Frederick Law Olmsted. Though my happiness was at times strained by trying to decipher Olmsted's execrable handwriting, execrable handwriting, I read and mined dozens of books about Burnham, Chicago, and the Exposition, and the late Victorian era. Several proved consistently valuable. Thomas Hines Burnham of Chicago, 1974. Laura Wood Roper's Flow, a biography of Frederick Law Olmsted, 1973. And Witold Rybczynski, A Clearing in the Distance, of 1999. One book in particular, City of the Century by Donald L. Miller, 1996, became an invaluable companion in my journey through old Chicago. I found 4 guidebooks to be especially useful. Okay, and it just goes through a bunch of shit. Alright, none of this stuff is really important. Just gonna be honest. So I'm gonna go ahead and we're done reading here. I'm gonna go ahead and just go through some of the notes that I wrote down throughout the book. Page 111, 171, 121. I like to highlight stuff just for the sake of, like, you never know if it's like a life lesson you can take in. It's like old wisdom in a new era that still accounts, still resonates. Let's see. 121. That's a weak one. Page 26. What's 26? Here we go. So I have here, I have a note that says, love this saying. What's the saying? Make no little plans. They have no magic to stir men's blood. I love that. I really do love that. I'm gonna put a little footnote here. I'm gonna bend the page so I know this is an important one. Make no little plans. I don't like little plans, right? They don't stir up your blood to get you going. I like that, right? Life and my journey has been very worthwhile. It hasn't been perfect. It hasn't been great. I'm not rich. I don't have material wealth. But I've taken a lot of risks in my life. And those risks, some of them have paid off, some of them haven't. But I think that's a beautiful saying, right? Make no little plans. They have no magic to stir men's blood. That's very true. You can't explain that with science. You just can't. Let's go to page... looks like 177 or 171. See if there's anything good here. I have here underlined, it takes no end of time and worry to get a thing settled right, but only a second to have orders given out for a wrong thing to be done. Okay. You can spend your entire life trying to get something right, but if the instruction given to begin with was wrong, the rest is just lost. Okay, I see the point here. I'm going to make another indent here in the book, kind of stating that good instructions... I'm gonna write this down. Good instructions good instruction is the foundation of great execution. Good instruction is the foundation of great execution. Okay. Be explicit and flat-footed in your wishes, right? Be stern, right? Call your shots. Be honest about them. It's another one I like. We'll go to page 211. 211 here. What do we have at 211? Page 211 shows... I have here beautifully put, and it's in reference to what the book says. If the article is black, add a little ammonia instead of acid to the rinsing water. What? Oh, I remember this. Okay, I remember this. Gosh, I gotta... This is one of the most important ones. This has a lot to do with love and companionship and a woman's role in life, right? Not in a sexist sense, but in a demonstrable sense of the importance of women, right? Women set the tenor, and I'm going to read a quote for quote from the book, starting in the middle of the paragraph of page 211. The wife was to set the tenor of the day. The breakfast table should not be a bulletin board for the curing of horrible dreams and depressing symptoms, but the place where a bright keynote of the day is struck. In places, Hollingsworth's advice revealed, by refraction, a certain Victorian raciness. In a segment on how best to wash silk underwear, she advised, if the article is black, add a little ammonia instead of acid to the rinsing water. Take pride in what you do, no matter how big or small the job might be. If you're a wife, you need to take pride in that work, and that it was beautifully put. I mean, it's something I think everybody can use in their day-to-day life. Coming home to a clean table. Imagine coming home to a table full of medicines and crap that just kind of depresses you, right? I'm not saying you have to put a meal there ready for me, but let's have a clean place. A clean bill of health on the inside is gonna pay dividends on the outside. That's in your personal body, that's in your home. If you can take care of the home's gonna take care of you, you know? I love that. That's a great one. That was 211. We'll go to 251. 251. Looks like I read a lot in this book, didn't I? Illusion of power is bullshit. We're all people. Enjoy yourself. I don't know why I put that. It's true. There is no, there's no difference between you and me. The blood inside of me is inside of you. It just is. The sooner we come together, the better. Maybe that's something that I meant by that. I'll make a little bookmark there. I don't want to have to read through this, but yeah, that's what I put down there. That was 251. 287. What's 287? 287, 285. 285 reads, have encountered Oh, chance encounters lead to magic. Yes. You never know when the start of your new life is, right? Walking into a college, a community college for the first time, that might be the start of your next career. Walking into a restaurant, you might meet the love of your life there, you know, trying new things. I mean, I know for me, meeting my best friend, building my computer, and getting on a video game for the first time in my life, that was a chance encounter. That just happened, right? That's magic, and that's magic that I'll eternally be grateful for, and you can't mimic that. You can't recreate that. I wish you could, man. I would. Wow, God, I would do that every day if I could. And 287, we have short on news, long on invention. Short on, oh, I see what they're saying. Okay, so short on news, long on invention. I'm gonna read this real quick because I think I liked what this was all about. And just rumors, right? So many rumors that were just crap, meant nothing, didn't help anybody. And again, they were just rumors built on concoctions. You know, it was just absolutely rumor weeds and parasites. You know, people trying to make stuff up and stir stuff up for their own personal gain. You know, this dude stuck by his guns and just kept pushing the issue, because rumors can get in your head, things can get in your head, and that's like poison. That's just like a cancer. You know, don't let that happen. Get away from it all, no matter what it takes. Get away from it all. Now we're into the 300s. 327. What do we have there? 327. 327. People want to see something if it's the last time. Supply and demand. That goes for products, that goes for life. If you knew you would only see the love of your life one time in your life, you would cherish that moment forever. You would never want it to end. But if you know you're going to see your wife every single day, maybe you take her for granted a little bit, right? Supply and demand. Her supply and love is so high that the only way to meet your demand is if your demand is incredibly high, and the only way for your demand to be incredibly high is for her supply to be incredibly low. It's how can you miss me if I'm never gone? It's push and pull. It's yin and yang. You know, so that's kind of the way I interpreted that quote. But I like that as well. Going to the next one, I had 287 or 328. Sorry, I have written down, if you won't be able to hold on to it forever, let it go.
Shopping with your parents can be embarrassing.
Why would they sell jeans with holes in them?
Maybe because
Mom,
you're that ugly that you need the holes to be like a personality trait. I don't know. Get off my computer, man. If you can't hold on to something, let it go. Everything in this life, you're not going to be able to hold on to it. Let it go. But what you can keep forever is memory, love, your character, whatever that might be. Everybody has a different character that they mold themselves after. But those are some of the only things you can keep. You can't keep the material. You can't keep the pictures. But you can burn them into your mind and have them as memories, beautiful memories. But you can't keep the material. I think it's somewhere in the Bible, John said something along the lines of, and I'm probably butchering this, but do not love the world. Do not love this world. Do not love what is of this world, right? Don't live for the material. Live for the immaterial, what's inside of people. That's the magic that we seek, really. So I completely love that quote as well. I like that. Continue on. That was tweet 327, 328. Let's go to 321. We have 321 labeled here. 321. Can't miss me if I never go the fuck away. Yeah, okay. So yeah, that I basically already read ahead with my thought process. That was in regard to the quote, "Indeed, it is the ambition of all concerned to have it swept away in the same magical manner in which it appeared, and with the utmost dispatch." So yeah, basically saying, if that fair would have lived on forever, it would have became novelty, right? Disneyland isn't really magical because you go there one time, it's magical to you, but if you really wanted to, you can go whenever you want. The experience is magical, right? The illusion that it gave you was magical, but Disneyland itself is going to be around forever. It loses its cachet with the old people because old people want to go to amusement parks too, but Disneyland is just the same one over and over again. But if you had a new one, a better one every single year, people would line up all the time. That's why you get WrestleManias. That's why you get Super Bowls. That's why you get, NBA Finals games. That's where adults go because the players are new. The circus is new, right? The arena is new. These things are new. So it's a good insight into life, I think. You need to recognize that. Can't miss people if they don't go the hell away. 319 here. 319. Gonna go backwards a little bit. 319. What do we have at 319? Nothing important. That wasn't important. Sorry. 315. 315. Let's double check this. Nothing important once more. 349. Now we're going upwards. 349. 349. His weakness was his belief that evil had boundaries. Yeah, man, you gotta remember. I know the fair is like the headline of this book, what this book's about for the most part, but evil lurked in the darkness, and it lurked essentially freely. It was free to roam around and do what it wanted to do. Remember, they didn't catch this guy because they were trying to look for the murders. They caught this guy because they were trying to dig into insurance fraud. So that tells you where the priorities of the country back then, even today, still are, I would argue. Shame, but that's kind of the way the cookie crumbles. But yes, the quote is, his weakness was his belief that evil had boundaries. We'll go on to 355, 353, and 355. And I wrote, why couldn't he sorry. Sometimes my cursive goes out of whack and I can't read it. Why would he boo? Why would he berate others this way? Let me read really quickly. Each day until I know she is safe from harm and annoyance will be a living death to me. Why wouldn't he look at others this way? Okay. That's an O? Yeah. And I mean, that's love, right? Each day until I know she is safe from harm and annoyance will be a living death to me. Just wishing love on people and wanting the best for them, even if they're not around. You just want them to be safe. You want them to be taken care of, because again, evil is not special. Evil is within most people. You just gotta keep an eye out for them. But yeah, that's love right there. Man on a mission with good in his heart. Yes, so this is with respect to Detective Geyer. The quote reads, Detective Geyer's lone search through the sweltering heat of that summer that captured everyone's imagination. It captured everybody's imagination because that's a man on a mission with good in his heart, right? You don't see those people win traditionally. Traditionally, it's the bad guys who win, and this was a good guy who said, F you, I'm gonna figure it out. I'm gonna help people. And he did it, and I'm incredibly proud of that guy, sincerely. Goes to show that good things do happen to good people, but sometimes you got to fight for it in a world that doesn't traditionally honor you for doing just that. We'll move on to 378. Almost done here. 378. And I have the quote reads, if I were able to take the time, I believe that I could prove the continuation of life beyond the grave. Reasoning from the necessity, philosophically speaking, of a belief in an absolute and universal power. So it's like belief in a God. In my opinion, the way I read this was he could prove that believing in God was the reason why people continue to fight forward. It's the reason why people continue to live, because yes, it's true. Once you are dead, you just drop. Okay, you just drop. But you leave something behind that people can be proud of. People can work on and grow. You leave an empire. You leave children. You leave something that the world will either cherish or punish. In the case of children, what you leave behind is people who can do the cherishing, who can do the punishing, who can do the fighting, who can do the work. And that is the beauty of it, right? What people don't comprehend when they see someone pass away is that life just stopped for that person, not for you, and not for the ones who are going to come after you. Life goes on. This circus has to go on. Well, it doesn't have to go on, but we choose it to go on. Why do we choose it to go on? Because life can be so much better than what it is, and we know that. That's why we keep fighting for it. But in order to keep that faith alive, you got to have your deity. You got to have your God. You got to have your belief in a higher power. You got to know that there's a brighter tomorrow, even if today has just been pure pitch black, right? I mean, it's always, what do they say? It's always darkest before whatever the hell, right? What's the saying? It's like, it's always darkest before the dawn. It could either always be darkest before the dawn, or on the other end, you can look at it as it being darkest before it becomes pitch black. Well, even if you let it get to pitch black, there's no other way in the yin and yang of life, in the dichotomy of life, but then to go to the light, right? Just my 2 cents there, but yeah, I like that. And then the last thing I have written down here is on 281. Let's go to that, and that'll be the end of this novel. And I have quoted here, beautiful, and I say, being broke didn't disturb me. Oh, sorry. The quote starts a little earlier. It says, but one thing was quite clear, and we read this in this video. Being broke didn't disturb me in the least. I had started with nothing, and I now found myself with nothing. I was at least even. Actually, I was much better than even. I had had a wonderful time. And that's the way I'm going to end this book. I mean, if that doesn't, give you chills down your spine, I don't know what will. I resonate to that very well. I didn't grow up with money. I know it's important. I know having a skill and a job is important, and I commend those, and I will gladly take part in that rat race because I know I have people who rely on me to do so. But it's the little things in life that I cherish because, I used to have a lot of friends. I used to have a lot of love, a lot of joy, joyful moments that I cherish in my heart from living in a very poor community, an apartment complex community. And those moments are gone. Materially, I'm better off. Bigger home separates us more, right? But it gives the illusion of happiness. So why am I not happy? Well, it's because people are the magic. What's inside them is the magic, and I think that's a great philosophy in life to have, and that's something I very much keep in my heart. I'm not saying I want to end up broke. I'd much prefer to have a savings account and a retirement fund, something that I can essentially, keep fueling my life. But I don't count richness and riches in dollars and cents. And I don't think anybody listening to this should either. The experiences of my life have been phenomenal, and money has not bought a single one of them. I wish it could, but it can't. And I remind myself of that every day. Money's important, but it's not going to be the reason why you get up in the morning. And if it is, I strongly discourage that path in life. Just because I think you're going to pay a bigger price than just dollars and cents if that's all you focus on. But anyways, thank you for watching. We're coming up at the end of this spectating game, and it looks like it's a pretty spicy game. Looks like some stuff's actually going on here. What's this guy's name again? Count Dooku or whatever? Something with a D? I know his name's not Count Dooku. Grievous, General Grievous, there you go. Oh my god. Pick up an AR, dude. You gotta go to your left. AR? I mean, you're hitting your shots. I'm not saying, don't. But that blue AR looks mighty tasty. Go ahead. Show them why. Left side. Why give up high ground? Why? Why? You dunce. Get behind the tree. Get behind the tree. Get behind the tree. What are we doing here? What are we waiting for? How about you show some nuts and push? He's got to come to you. He's got to come down. So stay pretty. Stay looking pretty. Get that shotgun out. Still has high ground. Use the tree. Use the tree. Oh, I don't know about this. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful shot. Beautiful shot. Wow, wow, wow. This is such awful positioning. You have to use a tree. Don't scope in. He has the visual on you. Don't, no, yet, no, 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 you're dead. Oh, Dooku. Why? Why?
Ready for the best summer day in LA. Universal Mega
Oh
Movie
my
Summer
gosh.
Universal Studios.
Well, thank you for watching. That'll be it for now. Until next time. Until the next book. Goodbye.